graphics card prices continue to fall, though high-end GPU prices remain a challenge. We now have new, mid-range, and budget GPUs launching at affordable prices. Welcome back to PC Builder, I'm Jason. We're going to take a look at the best graphics card to buy in June 2025, from the best budget graphics card all the way up to the best 1440p graphics card and best 4K graphics card in 2025. And we'll look at upcoming graphics card launches and sales so you can get the best value GPU right now. If you get value out of this video, please give it a like so it really helps out, and of course subscribe for more cool PC content. With that, let's jump into it. This video is sponsored by VIP SCD Key. Say goodbye to crazy expensive Windows licenses and that terrible Activate Windows watermark. Right now, use the links in the video description, head over to VIP SCD Key and get a Windows 10 or 11 OEM license for a great price. Pick your product license, then use the PC Builder discount code PC25 for an additional 30% off. Go to the activation settings on your PC, put in the code, and boom! Windows is fully licensed for a crazy low price. And they have Microsoft Office licenses too. Use the links in the video description. Let's start off with new GPU launches in the lower mid-range segment. We have the RTX 5060 8GB along with the upcoming RX 9060 XT 16GB and 8GB GPUs. Now the RTX 5060 8GB launched on May 19th at a $299 MSRP, essentially unchanged from the RTX 4060. The RTX 5060 is 25% faster than the 4060, but that's mostly because the 4060 used an inferior GPU die, really should have been called the RTX 4050. But the 8GB of VRAM on the RTX 5060, it essentially means it's not going to run an increasing amount of titles at 1440p, even 1080p. Launch volume appeared to be good for the RTX 5060, or maybe just demand was a lot lower. And right now, you can pick up a variety of models for around $300 to $320. Meanwhile, AMD announced the RX 9060 XT 16GB and 8GB versions for launch on June 5th for $349 for the 16GB version, $299 for the 8GB version. AMD claims the RX 9060 XT 16GB is slightly faster than the 5060 Ti 8GB, though at the time of filming, we do not yet have third-party benchmarks. That would be very impressive performance for a $350 GPU and be slightly faster than the RX 7700 XT 12GB, which you could pick up for $349 last fall, but with access to FSR4 upscaling, it's an upgrade. Launch volume rumors point to it being pretty well supplied, but like the RX 9070 XT launch, I expect them all to sell out within the first hour or so. So if you want one at MSRP, I'd be ready on June 5th at 9 a.m. Eastern time. For the 8GB RX 9060 XT, it is likely quite a bit faster than the 5060 8GB, but the limiting factor here is that 8 gigs of VRAM. So just like the 5060, it is instantly in the F tier garbage bin of GPU value. Also, in my opinion, AMD should have called the 8GB version the RX 9060, not the XT, and not followed NVIDIA's terribly deceptive naming scheme for the RTX 5060 Ti. AMD, just don't do it. Let's jump into current GPU pricing for AMD Radeon GPUs. Note that the RX 7000 series, it's largely sold out and likely will not be coming back. RX 9070 XT and RX 9070 availability, it's been better than last month, but still infrequent at anything approaching MSRP. While we have seen several models like the Gigabyte Gaming OC, the Asus Prime versions, drop in at better prices around $720, we even had the ASRock Steel Legend 9070 XT at $699 again. Briefly, those listings usually only last for a couple hours at a time. But in the past week, we've seen them pop up just about every day in the morning at Newegg before they go out of stock, which does seem like stock is steadily increasing. You can pick up an RX 9070 XT for as low as $699 with a combo deal at Newegg, and even cheaper with some of the combo discounts. While that's great for system builders, for those just looking for the GPU, it's been super frustrating as you either have to catch the $720 models when they do drop into stock, or you have to pay closer to $800, even $850 US for a readily available in-stock model. Similarly, the RX 9070 non-XT can sometimes be had for as little as $649, like the Sapphire Pulse model. Now that's still 18% over MSRP, but often it sells closer to $679 or even $700, and that's for models that are supposed to be MSRP, like the PowerColor Reaper 9070, not for the higher-end overclocked models. Given how little is available below $600 US for GPUs, the RX 9060 XT 16GB launching at $349 will be a welcome addition, especially if AMD can actually keep them in stock after the launch at anything near the MSRP. Meanwhile, the only other AMD models that can still be found are the RX 7600 XT 16GB, selling for a ridiculous $349, and the 8GB RX 7600 at $279, along with the long-lived budget staple RX 6600 8GB at $219. Moving over to the NVIDIA RTX 50 series pricing, and we do see some big changes. You can finally pick up an RTX 5090 GPU for under $3,000 US. In fact, this morning, one model dropped considerably more than that to just over $2,600 US. Still 32% over MSRP, but is a massive drop from last month, and overall it's a good sign for the GPU market. Unfortunately, the RTX 5080 prices, it's still stuck at just under $1,400, though we now have several models just below that $1,400 mark instead of just one. But of course, the 5080 remains stuck at 39% over MSRP, by far the most over MSRP of any of the 50 series GPUs. Mr. Bear. Last month, the RTX 5070 Ti was kind of coming in and out of stock under $900 US, similar to what's happening right now with the RX 9070 XT. But this month, we now have several RTX 5070 Ti models below $850 and as low as $824. Now that's still 10% above the MSRP, but is a substantial price drop from last month as more GPUs come into stock in the US. And this has been one of the more popular 50 series GPUs. Meanwhile, the RTX 5070 12GB price, it's been stubborn at just over $600, but we now see a larger amount of models available for that price. It's still 10% over its $549 MSRP, but it's also among the closest to actually reaching the MSRP. Meanwhile, pricing on the RTX 5060 Ti 16GB was $479, down from $529 last month. With the RX 9060 XT 16GB launching on June 5th, I'm hopeful we'll see price drops on the RTX 5060 Ti 16GB down to that $429 MSRP. Meanwhile, after most of the MSRP models of the RTX 5060 sold out on launch day, we do have some coming back into stock today at the $299 MSRP. Now that's either because there's a ton of supply of those things or demand is incredibly weak. Given how weak supply has been by NVIDIA, I suspect it's the 8GB of VRAM keeping buyers away. Looking quickly at Intel GPU pricing, and we do see another glimmer of good news. Not only have the ARC B580 12GB and the ARC B570 10GB held their pricing, they are now continuously in stock. Now, whether that's due to increased supply or decreased demand, it's hard to tell, but I'm hoping that competition drives these prices closer to their original MSRPs. Meanwhile, budget gamers rejoice as the ARC A750 is back at $199, and I've even seen occasional listings of the ARC A580 around $180, though stock remains really thin. And of course, it wouldn't be a 2025 GPU market update without an update on tariffs. One thing that might be having an impact on GPU prices right now is the gap between the initial Liberation Day tariff announcement and the exclusion of semiconductors from those tariffs about 2 weeks later. Basically, companies held off shipping things during this period, or they shipped them to other markets like Europe and Asia. Then they ramped back up after those tariffs were excluded on semiconductors. Now, this shipment gap, about 2 weeks, it's likely hitting GPU availability about right now. So it is possible that once we get through this kind of rough patch in the US, GPU availability might increase quite a bit in mid to late June. All right, let's start off with the best graphics card under $200 in June 2025. Well, let's call it around $200 US. Looking only at brand new models, I will bring back the used section in a future episode. I just wasn't able to do it for this one. The good news is that if you can find an ARC A750 for $199, it isn't a bad choice. And it's at least slightly faster than the RX 6600 most of the time, and quite a bit faster in some select titles. Now, the trade-off here is that sometimes you'll wait a little longer for a driver for a new release game. So despite the slower performance, those of you who just want it to work all the time should absolutely spend about $20 more and grab the RX 6600. Now, whatever you do, avoid the RTX 3050 8GB, which is considerably slower and costs just as much, and do not buy any of those 6GB trash GPUs. Moving over to the best graphics card under $300 in June 2025, and I'm gonna extend this a bit to $350 so you can also see where the 9060 XT 16GB model lands and the best GPUs from the lower bracket as well. This is a rough price range, and all these GPUs have drawbacks. The 8GB GPUs, including the upcoming 9060 XT 8GB, which I don't have here, but it should outperform the RTX 5060, they're all terrible buys. I do want to like the ARC B580 12GB, but it does have a CPU overhead issue. My advice here is to have at least a Ryzen 7600 or an i5 13600K class of CPU for it, maybe a 5700 X3D. And it's too expensive if the RX 9060 XT 16GB exists around $350. The ARC B570 doesn't offer any real value for only $20 less, and we lose 2 gigs of VRAM. The 7600 XT 16GB is just too expensive for the performance. My advice here, either grab an ARC B580 for $299 or find an extra $50 and get the RX 9060 XT 16GB, which by my projections is going to be 30% faster than the 5060 with 16 gigs of VRAM. Remember, these are projections for the 9060 XT. They are not actual benchmarks yet. We will go to those soon, and I'll leave a note in the pinned comment if performance deviates significantly from what I'm showing here. All right, let's move over to the best GPU under $500 US. Now, I've also left in the ARC B580 so you can see the performance difference here. But I have left off the RTX 5060 Ti 8GB GPU because it is total trash at nearly $400, so just don't buy it. So right now, you can either spend $479 to get the RTX 5060 Ti 16GB. That isn't terrible if the RX 9060 XT 16GB were like to sell out or be out of stock or something. But honestly, unless the 9060 XT 16GB falls completely flat on its face in terms of performance, or there's some horrible flaw with it that's discovered in reviews, it is hard to see why you would pick anything else in this price range. Now, we did a best RX 9060 XT PC build video that you can check out, and we were able to get those great builds starting at only $750 for an insane level of performance. Of course, if the 5060 Ti 16GB price were to fall closer to its MSRP, around $429, the 9060 XT were to sell above its MSRP of $349, then maybe I'd consider it, but otherwise I'd spend that money elsewhere. All right, getting the best GPU under $700 US, and these are really the best 1440p GPUs in the mid-range right now, given the current pricing. I know some will be tempted by the RTX 5070 12GB that is only about $120 more than the 5060 Ti 16GB, but it is quite a bit faster at 1440p. But for $650 right now, again, if you can find them in stock, which at the time of filming, they are actually in stock, the RX 9070 non-XT 16GB model, it's a huge step up at $649, and you do get 16 gigs of VRAM as well. If you do decide to go with the RTX 5070, I don't think it's a bad purchase. And as long as you aren't expecting like super high-end ray tracing at 1440p, which you shouldn't because it's only got 12 gigabytes of VRAM, then I think you'll overall be happy with this buy. Will the RTX 5070 be relevant for ultra to high details at 1440p in every single new release AAA title? In the future, that does remain a question with 12 gigs of VRAM. That's why I do lean closer to the 9070 on this. But again, 9070 is more expensive, so if you want the 5070, go ahead and grab it. All right, let's take a look at the best graphics card under $1,000 in June 2025, really between $700 and $1,000. Now, this is essentially a showdown between the RTX 5070 Ti 16GB versus the RX 9070 XT 16GB. At over $100 difference, my personal opinion, grab the RX 9070 XT 16GB, use that money on something else, knowing the rasterization performance is within about 5% and FSR4 is very good, and AMD does appear to be accelerating game adoption for it. But it's contingent on picking up either a combo with the RX 9070 XT to get the lower price, or snagging one on a restock drop, which can be a pain. So I wouldn't fault anybody for picking up the RTX 5070 Ti. It's a great GPU, and the price is significantly improved down to $825. As long as that price holds, and of course doesn't go back up to over $900 if the cheaper models do sell out again. Of course, DLSS 4 is also fantastic and has wider support right now. To me, the 5070 Ti, it's the true 80 class GPU of the 50 series. The same thing went for the RTX 4070 Ti Super last generation. All right, moving over to the best GPU 2025 in June for any price. Really, it comes down to whether or not you want to buy the RTX 5090. The price, it's way better than it was last month, at least if you can pick up one for about $2,600. For that price, you get about 50% more performance, and we are talking about another level that seems unlikely to be eclipsed until we get an RTX 6090 in a couple years from now. That's if NVIDIA is still making gaming GPUs by then, seeing as how much money they're making on AI right now. I just can't make an argument for the RTX 5080. It's roughly 15% more performance for almost double the price of the RX 9070 XT. Just seems kind of silly, and most folks probably could not tell the difference between the two in a blind gaming test. So in my opinion, even if you must have NVIDIA, it's either the RTX 5070 Ti or the RX 9070 XT, or you go all the way to the RTX 5090. Okay, let's play everyone's favorite game. Should you buy now or should you wait? Well, outside the US, in most of the world, many of these GPUs are fully in stock and they're at MSRP, sometimes even below MSRP. In the US, GPUs have been undersupplied and prices remain significantly above MSRP for most models. Those seem to be connected as a lot of GPU supply initially bound for the US market was diverted to other markets due to the trade war. But with the exclusion of semiconductors from tariffs, I do expect GPU shipments to the US to start to normalize and prices to start to creep down. But that's mostly on the higher end of the market. For those looking for a mid-range or mainstream GPU like the RX 9060 XT 16GB at MSRP, I would certainly be ready to buy one on June 5th at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Those looking at price points in between, I'm not sure how much cheaper the 5070 is going to get in the medium term, and we all know that waiting can be a major headache as well. Of course, if you're building a brand new system, we recently went over that 2025 is a great time to build a PC as prices for literally every other component are at historic lows. So much so that it makes up for spending more on the GPU right now. So if you're building a new system from scratch, I'd pull the trigger right now. All the graphics cards we've talked about today are linked down in the video description, including the Newegg combo deals. So click on them to check out pricing and availability in your market. And if you get value out of this video, please give it a like and of course subscribe for more cool PC content. Like our overview of every RTX 5070 Ti and every RX 9070 and 9070 XT. Don't buy wrong. Check out these guys for which one to get. Check them out. And we'll catch you on the next one.